Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to my Sichot HaRan shiur. This shiur is, I'm very excited to give it. It's all about suffering, which I think every human being can relate to. Rebbe Nachman's going to give us a outlook on how to manage it and how to handle it. So here we are. We're up to Sichot HaRan 194. I'm going to dedicate this shiur to Reb Shaila ben Reb Moshe because it's actually his yortzeit today. Okay, so here we go. Sichot HaRan 194. The Rebbe said, after all the suffering, God is still good to us. Our troubles are by no means minor, and we should not minimize them, but compare them to a single experience of Hashem's nearness, and all suffering is then like nothing. Okay, I love this line. Rebbe Nachman says here, right? Our troubles are by no means minor. People suffer. Everybody suffers. Some people suffer more than others. The suffering is real. And he says we should not minimize them. Like, don't think that they're nothing. They're something. And the fact that you're miserable, like it makes sense. And he says, but compare them to a single experience of Hashem's nearness, all suffering is then like nothing. So suffering is real and we go through it. But when you feel Hashem's closeness, then the suffering turns into nothing. So, like I remember listening to Rav Waxman shiur on Shar B'Tachon many years ago. And he talks about how like the babies on the cattle cars to Auschwitz, right? And like they weren't afraid at all because they had their mom with them. They had this nearness. They had they had their mother's closeness to them. And so too with us. Like we have to like access Hashem's closeness to us. And even just like on a personal level, and if it's happened to me, I'm sure it's happened to everybody else, like, sometimes like you're going through something really rough and you're having a very, very difficult time with it. And it just like comes to the top and you just have one of these like really good cries and like one of these like moments where you're just like crying out to Hashem. And like after this experience, doesn't necessarily mean that the crisis goes away, but you're much calmer and you feel like, okay, like I connected to Hashem. Like Hashem heard my tefillos, whether it gets resolved, whether it doesn't, like I know I broke some boundary there. And I feel like that's what it's like, like it's like, yeah, the suffering is real, but sometimes like you're able to just like have this moment of Hashem's closeness and the suffering just doesn't have the same edge. Like it just seems much calmer and quieter and less important, I would say. So I think that's what Rebbe Nachman's really talking about here. Like, yeah, like your suffering is real. Difficult things happen to people. Nobody's denying that. But sometimes like a single experience of Hashem's nearness, it's like the suffering is then like nothing. Okay, even like one of the hostages said that, of course, he doesn't miss being in the tunnels, but he misses that closeness that he felt from being in the tunnels, the closeness that he felt to Hashem. Suffering brings us closer to Hashem, closer to God. When we lose our health, who is taking it if not God? Therefore, we are nearer to Him. When we lose a child, who takes him if not God? If anything, these things bring us even closer to Hashem. Like all these things that happen to us, all these difficulties, like it's Hashem who's doing it to us. And Hashem is good, and they're meant to bring us closer to Him. I think I heard in it was a Rav Shlomo Katz here. It's like as if Hashem's like tapping us on the shoulder and being like, "Hi there, remember me? Let's come back." That's what the suffering is like. I also heard like in a Rav Shlomo Katz here, he's like, for some reason, like your dead aunt's inheritance of leaving you $180,000 doesn't bring you as close as when you're negative $180,000, right? Like all these instances of suffering, like the only point of them is really just to bring you close. One is closest to Hashem in the world to come. So that's the last line that how Rebbe Nachman ends the Sicha, right? we're the closest to Hashem in the world to come. When the suffering, when there's like, that's when there's not this darkness and not this suffering anymore, and just we see like Hashem's light and Hashem's or. So it's similar to last week's piece that we did about, I might reference it a lot because I didn't realize, but it has to do a lot with this piece. But it's similar to the Torah that we did last week about like, we need to remember at all times the world to come. And when I say the world to come, like we're not Olam Haba, we're not talking about like the reward in Olam Haba that we're hoping to get. We're talking about like remembering that there's this deeper reality, this other world where there are no questions, where we're just going to see like Hashem's or and Hashem's light. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So, okay, so now I want to go deeper into this topic of suffering. So we're going to do Likutei Moharan, Tanina 119. Okay, here we go. Okay. Rebbe Nachman spoke with us a number of times about the pain of this world, Olam Hazeh, that absolutely everyone in the world is plagued by suffering. There is not a one who has Olam Hazeh. And what he means, there's not one person, every person in this entire world has suffering. And nobody has like a complete, wonderful, perfect Olam Hazeh, in this world. Even the very wealthy and the privileged have no Olam Hazeh at all, because all the days are frustration and grief. They are all full of troubles, worries, misery, sadness, and aggravation, always. Each one with his particular woes. And so, of all the rich and the privileged, there is not a one for whom everything is always in order as he would have it. They are all as one, constantly full of suffering and worry. This is clear and known to anyone who is somewhat familiar with them and their ways, right? Like sometimes we could look at a person like from far and be like, oh my gosh, they haven't made. They are like the luckiest people in the world. And then like you get to know them a little more and you're like, not so simple. They got their troubles too, right? So Rebbe Nachman's reminding us of that if you're here in this world, if you have a pulse and you're alive, then you're bound to suffer. It's just the reality. I know it sounds very dark, but it is dark, but it's good. It's all good, okay? Hashem is good and it's all good and we're going to get there. Okay. We spoke of this a number of times and would see it all with our eyes. Even someone who seems to have Olam Hazeh completely, with all its pleasures, wealth, possessions, esteem, great riches, enormous palaces, amazing vessels and jewelry, and the resources of kings, if they would look at him closely, they would see that he too is always full of much frustration and grief in many different ways and matters. This is empirically obvious, and there's no need to explain it to anyone who has a brain in his head and honestly observes them a bit, right? There's no need to explain that everyone suffers. Like everyone knows, right? And as Rebbe Nachman says, as long as you have a brain in your head, like you could see this. It is as King Shlomo of blessed memory said, quote, also, all his days bring frustration and grief, from Koheles. And as it is written, but a man is born to toil. He's short-lived and sated with anxiety, from Eov. Right? Like we're born to toil, right? And we have constant anxiety. This includes every human being in the world, from the smallest to the greatest. Nobody is excluded, because all are born to toil and so are full of anxiety and suffering. Nor is there any advice or ploy through which to be spared from this toil and sadness, except by fleeing to God and being occupied with Torah. So Rebbe Nachman says, the only advice to which to be spared from this and to get through it is really to come close to Hashem and to be occupied with Torah. And of course, we know plenty of people who are full of Torah and mitzvos and they still suffer immensely. So Rebbe Nachman's not saying here that a person who suffers with Torah, person who goes to Torah and mitzvos won't suffer and won't toil. But what he's saying is it's going to give meaning to the suffering and to the, like, there's a deeper reason for it. And when there's a deeper reason for it, most of us can kind of get through it. It's like, It's, in Man's Search for Meaning. Of course, the author's name escapes me right now. Sorry. Okay. Man's Search for Meaning. He's a Holocaust survivor. And he basically said, Frankel, that's who wrote it. Okay. And he basically says, wherever, as long as there's like, you could get through any what with a why. Like you could get through any situation in your life if you understand the meaning behind it, if you understand the why. And Rebbe Nachman's telling us the same thing. Like, yeah, like even if you're involved with Torah and mitzvahs all day and all night, you'll still suffer, but it will make it easier. This is, as the Midrash brings, but a man is born to toil. Fortunate is he whose toil is in Torah, from Bereshis Rabbah. In other words, since every person is born to toil and it cannot possibly be avoided, even if he owns all the riches in the world, he will certainly experience much toil, suffering, and worries. And so a wise man has his eyes ahead of him, from Koheles. He turns the toil into the toil of Torah, which is the reason he was born, to toil in Torah. Then fortunate is he, because he is spared the toil of this world, and he merits life in the world to come. So because he's involved in Torah and mitzvos, he's not tunnel vision on his suffering. Instead, he sees this wider scope of things, and Amir Hashem in Olam Haba, he'll enjoy his rewards. It's kind of telling us also, don't waste your time, being just forever pursuing. And I mean, we're all comfort seekers. We all forever want to be happy and comfortable. And so Rebbe Nachman's telling us yeah, but there is no Olam Hazeh. Don't spend your time forever just trying to get comfortable and make this perfect and that perfect. He's just do what matters here, because either way you're going to suffer. And in the next world, Mir Hashem, you won't. Okay, the Rebbe of blessed memory declared, look, everyone says there is this world and the world to come. Now we believe there is a world to come. There's for sure Olam Haba. And it is possible that an Olam Hazeh exists in some universe. So this is kind of a funny line, right? Rebbe Nachman saying, I'll just read it again. And it is possible that an Olam Hazeh exists in some universe, but here it looks more like Gehenna, because everyone is full of great suffering always. The Rebbe also said there is no Olam Hazeh at all. Yeah, we call it Olam Hazeh, but really it's more like Gehenna. That's what this world is like. So it is a dark piece. It's not dark. I mean, Rebbe Nachman's not dark, but you know what I'm saying? It is a whoa kind of piece. But I think what Rebbe Nachman's trying to show us here that yeah, just know what it is. If you know what it is and you could understand, and you understand that this world is really just a hallway to get to the next world, then the suffering doesn't have to have the same impact. It doesn't have to be as powerful. It doesn't have to be as torturous. That's really the right word. It doesn't have to be as torturous. You can take a deep breath and you could be okay, this is, this, even though this world feels it's all encompassing and everything that happens here matters so much, really it doesn't need to. It's short-lived. That's the truth, right? We're not going to be here forever, and the world will still turn after us. So just do your best, study and toil in the things that matter, and have perspective. Have perspective about what this world really is. Okay, so now I want to read Sichot HaRan Tanina 82. This is an awesome piece where Rebbe Nachman's going to talk about things being in order and things being not in order. Kiseder v'shelo kiseder. So let's dive right in. Okay, Sichot HaRan Tanina 82. Ki tetzei lemelchama, when you go out to war. So Rebbe Nachman's talking about I read in one of the footnotes that he brings in this quote, when you go out to war, because it's this world can feel, we are literally at war, but this world can also feel, actually it's a ceasefire now, but this world could feel like a war, right? It's the war, ongoing internal battles, external battles, relationships, everything, suffering. Okay, here we go. Kitiv, as it is written, back and front you formed me. Achor v'kedem sartani, from Tehillim, Kuf Lamitet. This is the concept of order and disorder. Keseder v'shelo keseder. Front is the concept of order, the aleph bet in order. Back is the concept of tashrak. Kuf resh shin taf. That's the opposite. It should be taf shin resh kuf. Shelo keseder. It's not in order. The tashrak is not in order. So, right, like front, it's obvious to understand, right? Front, it's order, right? Like if you saw me from the back, you might not recognize me. It's not keseder, shelo keseder. But if you saw my face and my front, like you'd recognize me. It's keseder. It's obvious. The front is obvious. The back is not as much. This also corresponds to Adam and Chava, right? Because Adam and Chava, we gave this quote from Tehillim, Achor v'kedem sartani, back and front you form me, right? Adam and Chava originally they were created back to back, and then Hashem separated them. This also corresponds to Adam and Chava, order and disorder. So the name, I'll just read a little more, Havaya, filled in with the letter Aleph, has a numerical value of 45, Adam. Chava is the concept of malchut, mouth. She is called oral Torah from the Tikkunei Zohar. Okay, so Adam corresponds to this name, Havaka. And basically, so I'm just going to say the real name, Havaya, is Yud He Vav He, right? And really, there's all different ways to spell that name, Yud Ke Vav Ke. And when it's spelled when you spell the He, like He Aleph, then it's considered like spelled with an Aleph. You could spell out the way you could spell out every letter of the name, like He Aleph is He, Yud Vav Daled, okay? And so on. So when you spell it with the He Aleph, then it has the same numerical value as 45, which is Adam. Okay? And this name, by the way, corresponds to Hashem's compassion. Chava is the concept of malchut, of mouth. She is called oral Torah, Torah Shabbat Peh. Okay? Chava thus connotes speech, as it is written, and night to night, yechya, v'layla yechve da'as, from Tehillim. At night to night, she speaks out knowledge, namely Malchus' mouth. Malchus is called speech because there is no king unless there are subjects, for the people do not know what he wants unless the king reveals his thoughts and desire via his words. It follows that the primary execution of the kingship is through nothing but speech. This is the meaning of Malchus' mouth. So Chava is the back. She represents, Adam represents the front, Chava represents the back, and Adam represents this Hashem's name of Havaka, and Chava represents this Malchus, this mouth. Represents Malchus, and Malchus correlates to the mouth because Rebbe Nachman talks about this a lot, that like our whole purpose here is really to just like praise Hashem and to like recognize Hashem and say it out loud with our mouths. And like, Malchus is our conduit to really Malchus is the lowest sphira, and it's our conduit to really get to all the higher spheros. So, and we need, Malchus is all about praising Hashem with your mouth. Rebbe Nachman talks about learning Torah out loud with your mouth, hisbodeda, speaking, lots and lots and lots of speaking. This is a big concept of Malchus, like talking about Hashem's Malchus, about his reign with your mouth, okay? We see that sometimes, okay, so now that's like the general, and now we're going to bring it to the personal, okay? We see that sometimes things go unorderly for a person. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes things go shelo keseder, not okay. It shouldn't be this way, it feels like, right? And Rebbe Nachman's going to further explain this stuff about not going the way we think it's meant to go, right? And now this is a big line. The perfection of all things is only when they are united with and bound to Hashem. So what's perfection? What's like shleimas? It's when we connect it to Hashem. When we take the Shalok Seder, the things that don't seem like they're going the way they are, and we bring it back to Hashem, we connect it to Him, we unite it. The reason is that the completion and fullness of a thing is its life force. Thus, a limb from which the life force has departed is then considered missing, right? Like, meaning everything needs to be attached to its source, right? Our limbs need to be attached to our bodies. And when somebody loses a limb, it's considered missing, it's dead. In order for it to thrive and survive, it needs to be connected to the life force. And life force is the mentalities and the intellects, hamochim v'haseichel. As it is written, wisdom keeps alive, v'chachma tichya, from Koheles. Chachma, wisdom, is the concept of ma, of what? It's the concept of ma. Koach ma, right? Koach ma, which means like the strength that comes from Hashem. Me is our life. Ma kochenu is our strength. And ma is Adam, because there's no Adam without an Aleph, right? Adam needs this Aleph. Adam needs this connection to Hashem, this Aleph. Havaka filled in with the letter Aleph. In other words, the Blessed Holy One is the life force of all things, as it is written. You keep them all alive. Right? Chachma is the highest sphera. And Chachma represents this koach ma, like everything comes from Hashem. This koach, this strength, comes from Hashem. Everything we see is Hashem. It follows that when this concept of Malchut Chava is bound to Adam, to the concept of Ma, the Blessed Holy One, she is then perfect. And when Malchus is bounded to Hashem, then it's shleimas, it's perfect. So Malchus is like, again, it's like our conduit in this world. So it's very present in this world. So when we bring this Malchus and let's say our difficulties and our struggles to Hashem, then they're shleimas. Okay? Just like gonna give an empowered, surrendered wife plug here, right? This is how it goes. When Chava, when the woman is bound to Adam, when she, obviously everyone has their situations. I'm not here to get into that, but there is this concept of just it's a man's world and as a wife, it's our job to help them as best as we could. So when there's that, there's shleimas. So, okay, I could give a Shalom Bayis class another time, and Hashem should bless me with Shalom Bayis and let me be able to live this. But there is it, when Chava is connected to Adam, and when, the feminine energy is bound to the masculine energy, then there is this perfection. This is because through the intellect, which the Blessed Holy One invests in the implementation of his kingship, he keeps her alive. As it is written, wisdom keeps alive. This is also the earth is to God in all its fullness. When the earth, i.e. the concept of Chava Malchus, is bound to God, it is then in its fullness and complete. But right, so when Chava is bound to Hashem, then when this Malchus is bound to Hashem, then it's complete. But whoever splits off the concept of Chava Malchus for himself by saying, Ana Emloch, I will rule, with this, he splits off and separates her from the Blessed Holy One, and she is then incomplete. For her main life force is Ma, namely the intellect. Ma, Me Hashem. This is, since among all the sages of the nations and in their Malchus kingdom, there is none like you, from Yirmiyah. The explanation is, their intellect is not great enough to keep their Malchus alive. Thus, when he splits off Malchus for himself, things goes unorderly, Shalok Seder for him, because he's smack in the concept of disorder. Malchus, Kava, Tashrak. But when the concept of Chava is bound to the Adam, the Blessed Holy One, things then go orderly for a person. This is because wherever the masculine is present, the feminine is not mentioned there. It follows that the concept of Chava disorder is eliminated through the Adam order. So when a person wants to take, they want to take the Malchus and use it just for themselves and not connect it back to Hashem, then everything goes Shalok Seder. Meaning we have to have this humility and this self-awareness of what we are and what Hashem is. And, Maha Koach Shali, Chachma, what's my Koach? What's my brain? What's my... Nothing compared to Hashem. That's the answer. So, and when we recognize that all these things come from Hashem, even the suffering, even the problems, even the Shalok Seder, again, I don't think that it stops a person from suffering, because there's just always going to be suffering. But what it does do is it gives this understanding to it, which makes it so much easier to tolerate. Okay, so the last piece that I wanted to bring is in Likutei Moharan 250. Okay, I'll just read a little bit of it, but no. He starts off, Da. This is what a person must know. All manner of suffering and all afflictions are due only to a lack of da'as. Again, if you don't have this awareness, then the suffering hurts so much. For someone who has da'as and so knows that everything is by divine providence, certainly experience no affliction and feels no suffering, because Hashem has given, Hashem has taken away. Now, Rebbe Nachman himself suffered greatly, and he spoke about it openly. So I'm not going to, he definitely understood that everything comes, that the suffering is not, he understood that there is suffering, and he understood that it all comes from Hashem. But the point is, he's teaching us here how to handle the suffering, and what our perspective should be in the suffering. And although there are afflictions that we cannot help but feel, right? There are certain things you can't help but feel. And in the examples he gave, nobody should know about it. A mother loses a child, that's what he gave in the original Sikha, right? Or illness, God forbid, right? There are certain things a person can't help but feel. For example, the affliction caused by the body-soul compound, such as the affliction caused by the soul's departure from the body. This being also the affliction of a person who is sick, which stems from the soul beginning to separate from the body. And since the soul is compounded with the body through a firm and powerful bond, you cannot help but feel the affliction at the time of separation, right? If somebody's chas v'shalom is dying and their soul is leaving their body, there's no way that doesn't hurt, physically painful, that the soul leaves the body when the soul is housed in the body. The separation creates pain. Nevertheless, the afflictions are very mild and are bearable when one knows with a clear da'as that everything is by divine providence. All the more so, other forms of suffering and affliction which a person does not feel at all when he possesses da'as, as explained above. So I had a friend, Uriel ben Chaim Mordechai, who he died at 38 or 39 of cancer this year, and everyone said about him at the funeral, he didn't complain, and everyone, his wife will say the same thing, he lived with such emunah. He lived with such emunah, even he died of cancer, he was in excruciating pain. The doctors couldn't explain why he wasn't asking for more meds at every second. They were dumbfounded when they saw him. And it was he understood that it was from Hashem. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but clearly something very special was happening with him. And everyone recognized it at the funeral as well, and in the hospital staff, everybody, right? So there is this thing that if you have this da'as, if you have this godly awareness that Hashem is running the show and Hashem is good, then these things don't hurt as much. The pain is doesn't have the same edge. Thus, in the main, the suffering of the affliction stems from their taking the das away from him in order that he should feel the affliction. Rebbe Nachman says, yeah, but some people, right? And it's not to judge others that feel an immense amount of pain. He's like, yeah, because sometimes, and they could be tzaddikim. And Rebbe Nachman says here, yeah, because sometimes Hashem literally just takes their das away from them and they have no choice but to suffer. And this, in the main, is the suffering that Israel experiences in the exile, all because they have fallen from das and attribute everything to nature, coincidences, and fortune. Because of this, they experience suffering and affliction as explained above. So because, I'll just say the rest outside, but because we've been in Galus for so long and we learn from the other nations, right? Then because of that, we suffer. Because we think everything is nature and coincidence, and we lose this godly awareness that no, this is all from Hashem and this is all good. And I just, he continues this piece a bit more, but I just want to read one last part. He says, in truth, Israel is above nature, right? In truth, we're above it. The same things that correspond to the Goyim don't correspond to us. We have a different meddling. We have a different playground, let's say. We have a different playground, and our playground is Hashem and Hashgacha Pratis. So I just want to end this year, because I know that, as Rebbe Nachman knows, as he said, right, every person suffers. So I just want to end this year with a bracha, and I want to bless everyone to really see where the stuff, to see Yad Hashem in everything, in the goodness, in the good, in the bad, in the ugly, in everything. And everyone should just, have perspective about the suffering and not suffer, and just come close to Hashem through everything that happens in their lives. So, okay. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.